Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Glad you're all hanging out with us tonight. I know everyone's struggling in. We're all getting off of work and getting home and getting our snacks in and whatever else. I know how it goes. I want to welcome everyone to the CyberGangsters CyberSecurity. And this was just one guy's journey into understanding more about PCI DSS and GRC and cybersecurity, and has since just kind of grown to include just the whole umbrella of cybersecurity and different aspects of it. And so I come bearing great fruit because as I go out there and learn things, I meet so many interesting people. And those people impress me beyond belief. In fact, before I even tell you her name, let me tell you, I was talking to my wife about our guest tonight. And I'll get there. She's obviously right there next to me. But I told my wife, I was like, babe, my guest coming on tomorrow night is so awesome. Like, I attended a cybersecurity conference where I heard her speak, and I thought to myself, I don't know a thing about threat modeling. I don't know what it is, but I saw in her promo that they had on there, it had Death Star, and I was like, well, I know about Death Stars. I love Death Stars, so I'll attend her session and just see what goes on. It was so thinking practical sitting in there. I didn't feel like I was lost at any moment. I didn't feel like I was confused or anything else. She expertly wove threat modeling in with the Death Star, and it made complete sense. And I was like, if every teacher in the world could have an ounce of what this presenter was showing and do it like this, I think we'd all be smarter at the end. Okay. So without further ado, let me introduce you all to Audrey Long. Audrey, welcome to CyberGangsters CyberSecurity. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing so well, and thank you. Oh my gosh, what an introduction. Like, I'm blushing.
it was totally on par. My wife was like, I'm so glad you found something like that. I was like, right? Don't you agree? And she was like, yes. And she was all like, high five. High five. It was fantastic. But Audrey, and I know not everyone here tonight is going to get a taste, or they'll get a taste of that same thing and more. But I wish you all could have seen it. It was fantastic. Like, you were so clever in bringing that expertise about threat modeling and then really presenting it in a real world scenario situation. I say real world, and we're talking about Star Wars and the Death Star and everything, right? But you made it so, like, it connected so much, and it was just like, I'm not even stretching for an understanding of what she's talking about. And you did fantastic. Anyway, I'm
Thank
going
you
to
so
stop.
much. Yeah, and honestly, that's the hard part too, is like, you think you're an expert or like you do something really, really well, and then trying to teach and bring others along with you. So you got to make an engaging, presentation to bring others along, but also a lot of time went into it. I did so much Death Star research for that talk.
I appreciate you doing that. Then I totally appreciate that. I really think it was phenomenal. And so everyone, the conference, it was called Stronger 2023, right? And it was a free conference for anyone. I found it on LinkedIn, and I was like, well, I'll sign up for this and see what it's about. And the people that I met, or the people that I got to hear from there, were so interesting and fascinating. And that's where Audrey came in. Audrey, I don't know how they found you. Maybe we'll get there, maybe we don't. But however way you were introduced to present there, I'm glad that they found you and that you accepted and were able to do it. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. So with that, everyone, here on the CyberGangsters Cybersecurity, kind of like I said, my goal, my heart is to, I don't like to just consume media, but I love to create and contribute, right? So I want to contribute to my community. And the way I do that is by finding people who have not just a story to tell, but have something to teach the community, something worth spotlighting on. And I wanted Audrey to do that. There were two things when I got to speak to Audrey about coming on, right? Originally, it was the threat modeling, yes. But then as we spoke, she told me about her journey into the field. And it was just like, it goes without saying that, not just cybersecurity, but STEM in general, there's not as many women in that field. And so when you do see them, it's something to spotlight, right? I have daughters, and I want them to feel like when they see other women that they are empowered to do great things, and that they're not whatever long-standing beliefs have been previously held, that they don't have to adhere to those, if that makes sense. And so Audrey shared your story with me, and I thought this would be such an excellent opportunity to spotlight you. Okay. So with that said, everyone in the comments, I want you to say hello to Audrey and tell us where you're from. And then Audrey, I'd really like to spend a little bit of time, if you wouldn't mind, just telling us about yourself and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll first start by saying, currently I'm a senior security software engineer at Microsoft. And now that you have that context, let me tell you about how I got here, because it's been a crazy and wild ride. So I actually wasn't your typical high school kid. I didn't take, any types of examinations because I actually had no intentions on going to college.
Really?
I graduated high school, in 2007. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go into like this graphic design school. I want to be a video game designer, like for video games. Like that's what I want to do. And, afterwards, after leaving school.
What game inspired you? What were you thinking? You're like, oh, I'm going to make games like.
Oh, yes. So I'm actually an old school PC gamer, and I'm also a current PC gamer. So my grandma was one of the first ever in the family to get a PC. And we used to play like Castlevania, and my favorite series was King's Quest. And King's Quest started on DOS, actually.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So I loved those old point and click adventure games. That used to be what PC gaming was. And now it's like just turned into like so many different facets. So it's just really cool to see where games are like in today's world. So I got inspiration from playing so many old video games, like with my grandma, that I wanted to be a game designer.
Nice. Okay, cool. That's good to know. I was like, ooh, I want to know more. So
yeah, absolutely. I love talking about games too. So that's another story for another time. But
no worries. We might have to bring you on another show to talk about that then. So
of course. Yeah, but for me, so I didn't actually do anything except for going to graphic design school, which I ended up dropping out of, honestly, because the curriculum wasn't exactly what I had in mind. We actually didn't even get into like computer design or graphic during the curriculum. It was a lot more like drawing by hand and stuff. So it's just like, that's not really like what I want to do. So
yeah.
I left, and then I started working like 3 full-time jobs, to support myself. Yeah. I was working at a restaurant, at a bowling alley, and at GameStop. I was like an assistant store manager. And I was doing that for many years, It wasn't until I was about 23 where I decided, I don't like doing this. Like, I feel like I can do so much better for myself than work 3 jobs and 3 mediocre jobs at that, and like have no challenges, and, wasn't really loving my life.
Man, yes. I think a lot of viewers out there could definitely attach with that and feel that way. I think in the age, it's I don't think it's exclusive to that age range when you're just finishing college, right? I think there's people who've been stuck in a career for a long time. I know lots of people who have been in a career or jobs forever, and now they're making that change. That's what the CyberGangsters CyberSecurity channel is about. Is I've met so many people who are like, I'm making a change for my life. And what you just said is what I hear many of them saying. It's like, there's more for me, and I can't keep doing this. And it's 20 years over here, 30 years even. And they're like, I want a difference. I want to change. So
yeah, absolutely. And so for me, that change was, okay, I'm 23. Let's figure out how to go take, what was the exam called? Like the SAT. Let me go figure out how to take the SAT at 23. I figured it out. I had to go to some high school, and I took the exam. And honestly, I scored very average. And how I studied, and this is really funny, like hindsight, but I used to have a Nintendo DS. And one of the DS games I had was called like My SAT Coach. And it was just a little DS game that like gave me SAT problems, and I would practice by using my
Get
DS.
out of here. Are you serious?
I'm totally not joking. Like, this is true.
So in the gaming community, they have these fun games, and it always seems like Nintendo's the one who does it, right? They have these very interesting games like that, where it's your SAT, or like my kid who loves a lot of the horse games, and they're not like what you think, like a horse race. They're like going to take care of her, and she wants to own a barn one day and
Oh,
cater to horses. And it's like, okay. So that's funny that it was a video game was the medium to help you crack this test for you. So
yeah, because at this rate, I was been out of high school for like 5 years. I don't have my resources anymore. My family, and actually, this is another interesting point. I'm the first person in my whole family to have gone to college, so I didn't have like help from my parents or anything. My mom is actually Korean, and she didn't even get through high school, so it was just yeah, I didn't really have lots of
are you
help from like
serious? Wow.
from my parents or anything. So I had to figure it out on my own. Like this
That is
whole journey has been on my own.
insane. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That it's got to feel like there's so many feelings that have to be wrapped up in that. I'm a feelings guy, Audrey, and so when it comes to quantitative versus qualitative, I heavily side on the qualitative side of things, and so just feeling that, like even the heaviness of that, to look in your past and just be like the first to attend college.
Yeah, very non-traditionally as well.
Yes, amazing. I bet
Yeah.
your family was very proud of you, though.
Oh, absolutely. They still continue to be. But not without saying they sure did support me, mentally. They were always cheering me on. But if it came to anything like how do I do FAFSA or anything, they had no idea. So
Yeah. Which is a little side note. It's always good to have a mentor, and if you are someone who has children, it's okay to get them mentors early on so they can navigate that world. And if you've been in the career world, it is okay to still ask for a mentor if you've been in your job for however long. It's just good to have people.
Yeah, and I personally, I have like I think I have like 3 or 4 mentors, and I have a few mentees as well. So even if you're mentoring others, you still take the opportunity to grow.
I love that. Why does that not surprise me that you do that? That does. I shouldn't be surprised, but I do love the idea of mentor-mentee relationships, and I do believe that they help thrive our current generation and the future generations that come along. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And honestly, I feel like it's been so humbling having mentees because then you start to really understand like, oh, I actually do know a lot about what they're going through. Because there's always a fear, right? Like,
Right.
I don't want to take on a mentee because I don't feel like I know enough. But
Yeah.
you do, you so do. And once you have a mentee, it's so validating. Like, oh, actually, I do know how to help that. Like, I've done that before. Like, oh yeah, I've ran into that too. Like, let me explain
There's
how
so
I
much
handle
to be
that.
gained from it, and I feel like it is a humbling from a mentor role. Doesn't it feel like a humbling experience also to be like, man, I am relied upon to have certain information and provide certain advice and experience to folks, and it does matter. It does count for something.
Absolutely. And I feel like when you are also a mentor, you get better understanding and context to be a better mentee.
Yes. So when you have a mentee that's just like the bomb, and you're like, ooh, I think it'll be a little bit more like them.
Or like think
Like,
about some of the questions that they ask you. It's like that's a really great question.
right. And so there was an article today on LinkedIn, and I went, you know how you can contribute to articles nowadays, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
a community article. So I found one, and I was like, yeah. So it was about mentor relationships, or it was something about mentor. And I remember I was like, something like what mentees fail to do, or give them advice to make their relationship better. And I was like, always drive, always drive for the relationship. As a mentee, it's my experience and my expectations. When I have a mentee, you're the one driving, because you're the one that wants to learn and grow, or you know what I mean, you're the one getting most out of it. And so I feel like in the mentee's perspective, or in that relationship, you're the one who's scheduling out the time and making sure that it's consistently happening. At least that's my take on it. That makes me feel like, okay, our time is worth something to you, not just
Yeah,
me.
I agree with
So yeah. Awesome. All right. So then you got help, and you've navigated everything to get back to school on your
that.
own.
Yes. So the interesting thing though is I grew up in Ohio. So
Oh,
I'm from Cincinnati.
okay.
And my local school is the University of Cincinnati. And because of my SAT score, I actually didn't get accepted into the University of Cincinnati. Instead, I got accepted into a community college branch off of the University of Cincinnati main campus called University of Cincinnati Blue Ash campus.
Okay.
It's like a community college. So I actually got enrolled as a pre-engineering, and I didn't know pre-engineering was a degree. But I got enrolled.
Not engineering, but pre-engineering.
Yeah, it's like pre-med, I guess, but it's like pre-engineering.
Oh, wow.
What is that? But it's only because at the college or the community campus, there's not so many engineering courses that they offer. It's a lot more like math, science, physics, like some of those core classes. So you can get those out of the way, English, whatever. So I did as many classes as I could in the UC campus. And I also want to preface that when I was in community college, I got placed at like algebra, like the algebra level. So I had to like take a few classes up before I could even get into calculus, which if you're going in for an engineering degree, calculus is like where you start off with in the math world. So I ended up with like probably one of the lowest math courses. That's where I kind of get slotted in. And I ended up graduating, skipping ahead a little bit, from the University of Cincinnati's main campus. I got into the College of Engineering as a computer science student, and I ended up actually graduating with a minor in math and a major in computer science. So it doesn't matter where the odds place you too. You can always like overcome any hurdle if you have enough grit and determination.
So was this in tandem while you still held down 3 jobs, full-time jobs?
So in this part of my life, I only had 1 job, but I was still a full-time waitress as I was attending college. And actually the University of Cincinnati has a very interesting curriculum in engineering where you have to do 5 years of your degree. However, you have to do a co-op in between semesters. So it's a semester of school, a semester of work, a semester of school, and a semester of work. You don't get summers off. It's just continuous education and learning, and you get paid. So you got paid.
And that was going to be my next question. I was like, I hope you get paid during your work study times. So
absolutely. And you got paid a pretty decent engineering wage too. For me, I got really lucky, and how I fell in love with security in the first place is because I went to this school that made me do co-ops. In my first ever co-op, I landed in the Siemens Cyber Defense Center. So I was a tools team scripter there. It was like a SOC where I helped analysts with their day jobs and, creating scripts, built-in self-testing scripts to make sure our ArcSight rules were triggering, and which is like a Steam store product to make sure that, email trigger rules were actually properly going off, or, endpoints, whatever. There was just a lot of different things to actually to test out there. And like I said, I got really, really lucky with actually landing in a cyber role for my first
Why do
co-op.
you feel like that was lucky? What makes you say that?
So I feel like it was lucky, but also I showed a lot of grit and determination to land that role as well. Because at the time when I was applying, everyone has to have a co-op when you're in the University of Cincinnati's engineering degree. So that means everybody's applying for co-ops, like wherever there's a job opening. And since it was local to Cincinnati, that's where like a lot of people wanted to be and stay, is like local to Cincinnati. Yeah. And so the Siemens co-op interview was actually really difficult. They gave you like a take-home exam where you had to like fill out like all these security questions, like what is this, like decrypted, like you had to figure out like, oh, okay, like let's decrypt it, and like I can't remember the rest of it off the top of my head. And then gave you
I slept since then, so please forgive me.
Yeah, this was around 2016.
Okay.
So it's been a little bit of time, but but yeah, and it was just really interesting to like go through this whole crazy interview, because there was like a take home, and then there was a comprehensive like data structures slamming of like questions at you, because you're in computer science. They expect you to know data structures, so it's a lot of data structures questions. And then there also came the on-site interview where they gave me a little fizz buzz. I don't know if you know what that is, like coding question. No. It's a really simple little program that you have to write. But they give you like a piece of paper and a pencil, and they just like tell you to write down like these parameters. I would look it up. It's a pretty famous coding question for intro folks. If you're doing like a co-op or internship, They're probably going to ask you data structures questions. And I think the FizzBuzz question is one I've gotten a few times from a few different interns.
So for those of you listening, if you're looking to get into computer science or engineering or anything like that, you got a little tip right there. So a FizzBuzz question is what you're going to be asked more than likely. So do your research on that before you get there, okay?
And a string question. Yeah, any kind of string operations, like reverse this string, or, you know, how do you do this in a PEMDAS way, like, you know, forward to backwards. Lots of interesting string questions they can ask you. So I would always study up on those.
How did it feel like for you? So coming in, I guess I would say not being the best in the math area, and then you put your co-op, that's what you call it, right? You put your co-op at this place, and then you got chosen. When you step back and you look at that now, like, what does that make you feel like when you see just, man, you know, I don't even know how to put it into words. It's just, I don't want to say you started at the bottom, but let's just.
I did, though. I started at the bottom.
Okay.
Like, I don't think it gets lower than that, honestly.
I didn't want to make it, you know, I didn't want to make feel like I was kicking it down, but okay.
No, it's true, though.
Looking at starting at the bottom and then seeing here you were doing these, I'll say it from my perspective, complex coding questions and things, and then even landing the co-op at Siemens. Am I saying it right? Siemens. Sorry, Siemens. And then just like, do you feel like that was, I don't want to say easy, but looking back on it, would you say that it's something, honestly, like anyone with just some drive could really get through? Or, you know, like if there's someone watching tonight who's looking at that and thinking, I'm at the bottom, you know, they're looking at you and they're saying, I'm the same way, Audrey. I ranked at the bottom. I don't feel like I can go for my dream or goal of being a computer scientist or anything else like that. Like,
gosh, I mean, all I can say is if I can do it, anybody can do it. You know, honestly, before I even went to college, I never wrote one line of code. And I learned all of that through college. You know, I learned all of that in my co-op experiences, my classes. Did I have to work a little bit harder than some people? Maybe. Maybe it's because, like, I didn't have, like, I feel like a lot of people who go into computer science at least have an idea on, like, how to do some kind of program or, like, some kind of coding, but I didn't. So if I can do it, if I can go in at, community college level, get accepted into my local state school, eventually, you know, get a job at Microsoft, I believe anybody can do that. I really, really genuinely do. You just have to believe in yourself. You know, I am not going to lie. There were moments during my college curriculum where I cried at night. You know, it's like, I'm not smart enough to be here. Like, I'm not smart enough to be here. Like, who do I think I am? Like, trying to do something like this. And that's just imposter syndrome.
Yes.
You know, everybody feels like that. Like, if you go into an engineering exam room and, like, everyone gets like a 40 and, like, everyone's like, oh, I did great, everyone else got a 40 too, then it's just like, that's just kind of how it is. You know, a lot of people feel the same way. The difference is don't quit, you know, believe in yourself. Because I can tell you, my life has been totally changed because I didn't quit. And anyone else's life can be totally changed too. And I would say my life is so much better now. And it is hard work. I'm not going to lie to you. Getting a tattoo hurts. Going to school and learning when you're a little behind is tough. But at the end of the day, it is so, so insanely worth it.
Oh, man. That was inspiring. That was real cool. If I end up making, you know, what do they call it? Shorts or the reels for this, I'll make sure to cut that piece out and put it so everyone hears Audrey say that part. Okay.
Yeah, it's so true though. And, you know, sorry, getting back into my undergrad, after I completed that, you know, I got great experience as well at GE. It was awesome. You know, because of my experience at Siemens, I actually got into an application security development role in GE. And,
wow. So for
you know, honestly, it just takes that one experience in security to get you where you want to go. And in my genuine opinion, the best way you can get that experience, if you're not already in a field and you can transition into security, is to get that internship. If you're working at if you're going to school, and you know, don't are required to do co-ops, you're not required to do internships, do it. It's the best thing that you can do for yourself, because I learned I love security. I want to continue being in security. And I also learned, oh my gosh, I hate web dev. I never want to be a web dev engineer. You really get to learn a lot of that. And, you know, honestly, like all the people I worked for, like GE and Siemens, they all gave me offers too. So I work there full time after I graduate. So it's like also like putting you in like the door to a company that maybe you love. Like, you know, GE honestly was a great place. I wanted to live in Cincinnati and continue working at GE, but you know, my life said otherwise, so I had to get out of there.
Man, and you know, so the confidence boosting that comes from placing at your internship and then being told, yeah, we would love for you to work for us. Please come, you know, that's gotta be some amazing you know, it helps reassure you. Here's the thing. I feel a lot of times, Audrey, and you'll hear me say feel a lot here, right? I told you I was a qualitative guy. So I feel like a lot of the messages that I hear folks who talk to me about their journeys is usually surrounded about like not having that confidence in themselves, right? Or they're right on that bend when they really see the confidence in themselves, when they really start believing in themselves and their abilities in it, right? And it's like I've seen some amazing people where at times I hear them talk. I've seen what they've done work-wise in their internships, and I'm like, you're like a freaking genius in this stuff, right? And then when we're off of the internship and we're just hanging out, and I've heard them talking about themselves, or yeah, you know, too many butts is what I hear, and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like you killed it in there. You just got it, like, you know. And then once I see that clicks for them, it's like, man, they just shoot off, and it's the stars after that. It's like you're gonna meet your goal. You're gonna meet it. You're gonna meet it. So
absolutely. And honestly speaking too, I feel like that's going to just take you really far in any career that you choose as well. You know, like people like working with folks that have that grit and determination and that kind of that swagger about them of like, you gave me some ambiguous task. Okay, here's my first attempt at what I think you wanted. And then I didn't spend too much time on it. So let's course correct if that's not what you wanted. And then I'll spend more time on whatever it is. You know, ambiguity can be sorted. Absolutely. And I feel like in engineering and especially security, it's really ambiguous. Like there's nothing straightforward here. So I think that critical problem solving skills are crucial to being a good security engineer.
So, and it's not cliche, it's more on the absolute, like literal side of things. It's like, yes, don't overlook that when you see it on a description somewhere or request for skills, you know, and it's like, really believe that and really play that up if that's your strength. And you know, I feel like I see that a lot too, Audrey, is where a lot of times people get hung up on some of the skills and requirements that a job description has for them. And it's like, okay, I get it, they asked for this, but I think if you would show them some of your other strengths, they'll fall in love with that too. And so I say that in terms of people is like, I think it can be very important to highlight your strengths and not just finagle something around so that it makes you look pretty, right? I think it's important to play to your strengths.
Absolutely. And you know, I love looking at job descriptions. I still do it. I look at dream jobs and I see what skills on this job, my next job that I want, what do they have that I don't have? And then I can take that as an opportunity to educate myself. Like, okay, these people, I'm just going to say something arbitrary, right? Like they are really interested right now in large language models. You know, ChatGPT, OpenAI code is really taking over. Have I played around with that stuff? Like, can I go and, you know, create my own chatbot, see how it works? Because people love that. If you don't do that in your job, but you took the initiative to go try to learn it, that is just as good as having it on your resume. And like, I personally am under the impression too, where if you understand it, your chatbot, you know how the AI calls work, you understand a little bit about LLMs, from doing that project, put
Mm-hmm.
it on your resume. I would do it,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. And so I think, that's interesting that you say that, because lately something has been popping in my circles of people, and it's this whole kind of like, I think, so GitHub, right? Not super familiar with it. It's been coming up a lot more in conversations lately. And not just GitHub itself, but more of some way to capture those extra projects and minute projects that you don't necessarily think of on the spot when you're doing your resume or whatever, but having a place where you have all these things, projects that you've been working on, so that you can show people that, or you can pull those out to put into your resume for, because resume building is it's tedious work, but it's absolutely necessary, right?
Yeah,
And so yeah.
I could not agree more with you. I feel like, genuinely speaking, there's so many different facets of security, right? We can talk about
Yes.
that. I've worked in a SOC. I've worked as an application security engineer. I've worked as an actual like web dev engineer for security services and OAuth flows. I've worked in at Raytheon at the DoD. I did a few roles there. I used to be an anti-tamper security engineer, and I used to be kind of one of the more traditional, I guess, cybersecurity engineers in the DoD, where I had to do accreditation and ATO processes and Excel type security, if you will, information assurance type security. And then I came over into the Microsoft house, where I would call myself like an application security engineer, where I specialize a lot more into like threat modeling. But depending on what you are interested in, that's what you should really think about. Like, do you want to do coding? Do you want to be an analyst? Like, do you want to do Intel? Are you interested in embedded? Because all these things matter, because they're all completely different skill sets. And I honestly think it's interesting that we shove everything under the umbrella of security when it's all so incredibly different.
Yeah.
So like, if you want to be in engineering, an AppSec, for example, I recommend to you exactly what you said. Go start putting some projects on GitHub. Right now, I have people looking at my personal GitHub and my professional GitHub to see if I'm qualified for the next role. Like, people do it all the time. I put my GitHub on my resume. I actually made a little QR code so they could just like go to it.
Oh, that is clever, actually.
Yeah, they love that. And people look at your stuff. Like, it's not ever going to be overlooked. And another thing I will say personally is I have everything on my GitHub. In my personal one, I have all my school projects where I did school coding, all my personal stuff. It all goes into GitHub, and that's just your portfolio, like, for lack of a better, it really is a portfolio, honestly, in the engineering world. So keep it all together,
Does that work now? Again, not only recently been having this conversation. Is GitHub something where your coding skills and examples and things like that you want to show off, is that where it specifically goes for that? Or is it really like a repository for even non-coding projects? So people who are more into like the administrative or analyst side of things, is it useful for people like that too?
I guess it depends on what kind of assets you're storing. So if you're an analyst and you write a lot of scripts absolutely belong in GitHub. If you're even doing, like, maybe let's just say architecture, I don't think it's a bad thing to put that in GitHub. I do it all the time because version controlling your architecture is really important, especially when people if you have one Word doc, for example, or like one Visio diagram with like an architecture, and then you share it with amongst many other people. People touch it. People, version control and change history on Visio is like not a very intuitive thing. So making sure you always have that master copy in like some place where you can go retrieve it is great. And going through the iterations on that architecture is great too.
Okay. I was just curious about that. I know some folks who are more on the non, technical side of things, and so they're wondering. And it's funny because when I talk to them, I'm always like, "Well, what kind of work do you do?" And they've told me, and I'm like, "Well, that's a form of access control, or that's a form of network security, or that's a form of this or that." And I'm like, "You didn't put that. You weren't putting that on your resume, but that stuff should be on there. And so I was just curious if
Yeah.
there was like that. I guess maybe then for those scenarios, just an easy Word doc would probably work better.
Yeah,
Okay.
it depends. It just depends on what it is. But I would absolutely advocate that, let's go back to the AI example, right? AI is taking over the world, right?
Yes.
You hear about it everywhere. You hear about ChatGPT, you hear about DALL-E, you hear about OpenAI. Well, I would absolutely recommend, go out there and download it yourself. Play with it, play with the API. It's so fascinating. And even if you do nothing more than copy some sample code from the internet and run it and it works, and that's what you put in GitHub, that shows initiative. A lot of people need, like, sometimes when you're against another candidate and you're neck and neck, it comes down to the initiative,
Yes. Those little details that really show off your characteristics, right? I think that's those added things. I hear a lot from the CISOs and webinars and podcasts I listen to, I hear more and more lately where they're like, I am, as a CISO, they're like, I'm really looking at this and I'm seeing what certifications and school education they have. And then I'm matching that up to where I see them utilizing it, and they're like, the resume is one piece to it and everything. But when I talk with them, because it's not just also that professional or educational piece, but it's also like some of those characteristics, like what you're talking about, what drives you, what continues to push you, where does that, what am I thinking of, like that inspiration to do more, to be better, how does it look like? And then of course there's the whole how well we clash with the organizations that we're applying to or wanting to go to. So
absolutely,
I definitely hear that more often, and I do think I see more in this age than the ages previously, where people have opportunities to continue practicing in fields that they didn't have previously because of things like homemade labs now and non-traditional internships, right? That's another thing I've been learning about, or people who are in a different career for however many years, they're transitioning and they're like, how do I get into it? It's like one of those, it's an endless loop that you can't get into. And so these non-traditional internships seem to be a facet to help folks. They're like, I reached out to the threat modeler at Microsoft and all of a sudden she's giving me assignments and I'm doing something every month, every week, whatever. And it's like, well, there you go. I didn't ever think about that. Okay.
Yeah. And maybe a less popular opinion too. I actually, after I graduated with my undergrad in computer science and a minor in math, I actually got my master's in cybersecurity from Johns Hopkins. And sometimes what I've noticed is a lot of people who want to change industries, depending on the industry you're in, I see a lot of folks going and getting a master's. I worked with people pretty extensively, and I got my master's at Johns Hopkins, and they have a great curriculum. Like, I could not harp it anymore. I'm not telling you guys you have to go get a master's. I'm just saying that I think that it can give you some of that training that maybe you need, or that you're lacking, or that you would like to acquire to eventually get into, the security realm. And their curriculum allows you to pick classes and cater your master's to whatever it is you're interested in, like analyst routes. Maybe it's actually more computer science. Maybe it's more like automotive is like a really big thing in security at the moment as well, and quantum. And there's just so many different avenues, like information assurance.
Yes.
It's also not a bad idea if you're at that point where you already have a bachelor's, you don't want to get another one. I don't blame you.
And it's funny that you mentioned the automotive one. We have Rivian. I don't know if you've heard of these guys. Rivian is in my town. So they're making their electric trucks here in town.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, and that is I see more job listings for a lot of electric vehicle just weird job. I say weird jobs because you wouldn't associate like what you were talking about with the automotive industry as much, but we didn't have electric vehicles, and now we do. And so, security is another big factor into those things. It just opens up the job market too. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get back a little bit back on track. It's so easy to get off the sidetrack, but it's been fun, not in a bad way. Okay. So you got job offers. You eventually landed at Microsoft, and what did you, hold on. How did you know, was there a position at Microsoft that you were aiming for? Or did they say, Audrey, we have this position we think you'd be good at? Like, how did that part, what played out there?
Yeah, so I guess before I even applied to Microsoft, just to give you a little context, I was working at Raytheon as an anti-tamper software engineer. So I was more of an embedded firmware engineer on, interesting products, I'll say. I had a DoD secret clearance, so I was doing government work. But, I honestly, at the end of the day, I didn't think that role was really like what I was interested in. Especially from the technical standpoint. It was very challenging, it was very fun, it was interesting, I was learning a lot. However, the culture in the DoD wasn't really my favorite, if I'm going to be transparent about it. So I decided to look broader into different job offerings and opportunities. And I'm going to tell you right now, like, I never applied to Microsoft or like Google or Amazon out of college because I didn't think I was good enough to work at these places.
Okay.
But now, hindsight 2020, right? Like, anyone is smart enough. Anyone is capable enough to work at a company like this. So always just apply. Definitely go look and see what there is out there. And that's what I did when I was like working at Raytheon. I wasn't super thrilled with what I was doing. I wasn't getting a lot of job satisfaction. There wasn't a lot of growth opportunity. So I wanted to do something that gave me a little bit more freedom. And that's when I found the opening at Microsoft. It was for like a software engineer 2 position. That's what I was at Raytheon. And I did that transition pretty easily. And I can tell you that people loved the fact that I was getting a master's from like Johns Hopkins. That was really eye-opening for them when they were looking at my resumes and considering folks. They also loved all the security experience that I had. But I just want to put it out there. Once you get one security opportunity, it really will just open the door for so many security opportunities for you. Like, I've done so many different types of security roles. And some of them, I'm like, I don't even know if I was qualified for that, but I still did it. But it's just, you just need one.
I appreciate you sharing that, Audrey, because I think a lot of times people who are watching CyberGangsters CyberSecurity, a lot of times they can feel discouraged because they are trying to get into, I told you earlier, like the loop, right? There's a crazy loop. It's like you need experience to have this job, but you can't get this job unless, and it just keeps going back and forth. And I think that's good to hear. It lines up with when I tell people, I'm like, sometimes for some people, it's a numbers game. You just got to put in 100 applications to get X amount of interviews and hope that you can, you bust butt in that interview and show them. Because another thing I hear a lot of is like a lot of the job descriptions out there aren't necessarily accurate. A lot of times the people who are putting the job descriptions out don't know for sure what they're putting out either. And then even the hiring manager will look at a job description or a candidate and they'll be like, why did I put a job description out for again? What do I really need? And so,
yeah, I've seen that.
okay. And so that, I always tell people, I'm like, man, if it looks remotely close, go for it.
I would say though, I haven't seen that at Microsoft. So whatever you see on the application in Microsoft, that's what they're gonna have you do.
Interesting. So that's revealing something, considering Microsoft is the big tech, it's a tech giant, right?
And that's another thing I want to add. If you go into one Microsoft interview and they say no, that's just one baby branch of humongous Microsoft. Don't get discouraged. I think I applied to Microsoft. I'm not even joking. Like 5 different positions. I interviewed like 2 different ones, and then the third one, that was the one that ended up, taking me to the company. So it's just, there's so many different roles. There's so many different opportunities. There's so many different people. There's so many different people that need different things. Like, don't get discouraged if one interview set you back, right? Like, that is just one person in a huge org. And I'm not even saying that for Microsoft. I'm saying that for like pretty much any company.
Yeah.
Maybe except for the really small ones, like that have like one security division. Like that might be a little bit of different.
Yeah. So Evelyn posted this up. I'm going to read it off here. Okay.
Sure.
She says, hello from El Salvador. It's truly inspiring to hear stories of resilience, determination, perseverance, self-belief, and continuous growth. Such narratives are a genuine inspiration, showing that one's beginnings don't dictate one's future. With hard work and dedication, incredible achievements are possible. Overcoming challenges and rising to prominence in one's field demonstrates the power of perseverance and dedication. It's a testament to how one's passion and hard work can pave the way for remarkable success, even within prestigious companies. It was a
Absolutely.
mouthful, Evelyn, but thank you.
Beautifully said.
I agree.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. So Evelyn, she was watching from El Salvador, and she is on LinkedIn watching us right now, and so that's why some of the why it cut off there at the bottom. But yeah, thank you for that, Evelyn. Yeah, I see, and those are the kind of qualities I like to be around myself. People who exude those type of things. Not to say there's anything about other people. I'm just saying that's the kind of personality types that I like to gather around. People who are like, I don't mind acknowledging the faults and when we fall down, or I'm the kind of guy. I'm like, it's okay if you fall down. It's okay to hang out there for a minute or two. You know what I mean? Let's be
Really?
honest. It's okay, but let's get up. In the next hour, the next day, let's put a fine amount of time on there. Get up and then tackle it again. Right. So
I feel like you learn the most from your mistakes too. Like I
yes.
still remember mistakes I made in all my other jobs that I'd still carry with me because I was like, oh, I remember how much that sucked when this happened. I'm gonna remember like how to fix that so I don't run into it again. And honestly, like those experiences stick with you and they help you
Yeah.
grow.
I agree. I agree. All right. So then you got to Microsoft and you applied for several different positions. You were able to
Yeah.
get through the interviews on a couple of them, but then one you really landed. And is that the one that you're at right now?
Yes, it's the same position. I've been here for about 3 years now.
Wow. Beating the odds already, I say. So,
Yeah, and
you
it's a
know,
really interesting position too. I get to work with Fortune 500 companies who want to understand how to build stuff in Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud platform. It's like AWS, but for
for
Microsoft, it's called
Microsoft. Yep.
Azure.
Yep.
And I get to help be the security subject matter expert with security and identity challenges that they have for anything that they're doing. Rather that be writing code or architecture or really anything that they need help with with a security and identity perspective. I'll jump in on these engagements and I will help them out. It's been really fun because there's travel, which, as an engineer or a security person, we don't really get to go out much. So the fact that I get to go to customer sites is really fun.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of freedom to be creative with solutions or architecture that I come up with. And I just learn so much because I get to meet the customer where they are in their tech stack. Even though they're trying to also do stuff with Azure, they still have other, things that they're on right now, like Atlassian tools, for example, or maybe they're already in AWS and they want to migrate or see how they can do some kind of a solution together, like hybrid cloud kind of scenario. So it's really fun. It's challenging. It's interesting. And I see myself today not doing as much coding. I would probably say in my past jobs, let's call it 80% of that was code. Now I'm probably doing closer to 10 to 20%. And I feel like mostly it's because of the projects I'm interested in learning. Like, for example, I am really interested in ChatGPT. I'm really interested in threat modeling. I'm really interested in seeing how I can automate that. So,
Wow.
so those are things that I personally am looking into at the moment.
Okay. So that you mentioned threat modeling. And when I created the promo, I told everyone, "Do you know what threat modeling is?" And I was like, "Okay, well then you need to show up," because the assumption being is if you're reading it and you didn't know, then you'd want to know. And so,
Absolutely.
with that said, let's transition into that now a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get my slideshow up and I can
Yep.
share my screen. Give me one moment
No
to
worries, no worries.
get
So
that.
everyone, while she's doing that, I'm happy that you guys came in tonight and you're watching us. I can see you guys. I know we have a few more viewers actually than we have comments, which is fine. I hope you're getting a lot out of this. I really love highlighting someone's story, especially when it's so relevant. Like I said, I have daughters myself. I love showcasing people like Audrey on so that they know that they are not limited to certain, positions that for whatever reasons in the past have been quote unquote reserved for them, right? So I want to show them that there are better, more offerings available for them. And so, but I also love just learning, and I love meeting new people, right? So that's a personal enjoyment that I get out of this also, is just meeting new people and learning things. And so, yeah. Is that it down there, Audrey?
Awesome. Yeah, can you guys see my screen?
Not yet, but I can throw it on the screen and then they will see it. Are you ready
All
for me
right.
to do that?
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Just let me know when you see the threat modeling Star Wars edition screen.
There we go, I think. Do you see it?
Oh, hold on. I have to get out of this. Yep. Okay, I can see the screen. So if you guys can see it, then let me go ahead and give you a little overview on threat modeling. How about that?
Let me see if I can make it bigger.
Oh, you know, it might be because I'm sharing it on a long monitor.
Oh, okay.
Here, I can change it though. One moment.
So it's funny for those of you who don't know, and I always see this around in the offices, but there's a lot of people, especially in our engineering teams, where they'll have several monitors, but they'll have some extra monitors that are not long widescreen, like what movie theater, right? They're up and down like that, and so they can just read the continuous text all the way down. So
one moment, sorry, I have
no
to.
worry, no, don't apologize. It's okay.
But yes, it's funny.
So for you, those of you at home, if you can look or if you can type this out, tell me what you think a threat modeler is. Let's just see where that takes us until we get this. It'll work out here soon. I have no doubt about that. Just be patient with us as this goes on. It's the joys of having a live stream, so that when these things happen, it just happens.
All right. Live. Can you see my whole screen better now?
Let's see. Ah, there we go. Yes.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
Like I said, there is one long monitor. Yeah, it's just easier to view code. But unfortunately, it doesn't present well, I guess. Yeah. So that's the learning.
No worries, though. I love this. I can. Yeah. So is this the same thing I got to see at the conference?
Yes, it's a little bit of a different deck, but I'm not going to go through this whole presentation. Sure. I'm just going to go through some of the basics with you guys. Okay. And then we'll, because there is a big Star Wars portion of it, but for this session, let's just learn what threat modeling is.
Hold on, real quick. Stay there, real quick. Is that you and what's his name from Goonies? Is that what that is? Or is that the Toxic Avenger?
That's the Toxic Avenger.
Yes. Okay, real quick. Did you see the new trailer that they just dropped for that?
There's a new Toxic Avenger?
Yes, movie. They dropped a teaser like last month. Or wait, we're still in October. No, they dropped a teaser earlier this month for the new Toxic Avenger. I'm going to send it to you afterwards. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Not going to lie. I'm like super excited for it, okay?
So those of you who don't know, Toxic Avenger is like a super old B movie of like this nerdy kid who like got drenched in like toxic sludge and became the Toxic Avenger.
He had a pink tutu on, by
the way.
So
campy.
And Audrey, I was a big fan of B movies, still am. And that one has to be like one of the first ones, right next to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And
oh my God, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yes.
So good. It's such a classic too. Those tomatoes actually scared me when I was a kid.
They were a little freaky. And then they came out with a cartoon for both of them. And I was like, oh, they're not as freaky anymore. Now I like it. So anyway, I saw that and I was like, wait a minute, I thought it was the other guy from Goonies, but then I was like, no, wait. So, okay. I just had to highlight that real quick. Okay. So
yeah, absolutely. That's such a good catch. And I don't think anyone actually has ever identified that as the Toxic Avenger before.
Really? So, I am happy. You're just making me happy now, Audrey.
I'm being serious though. You can see the Toxic Avenger has a mop that he has like in front of me too. So even funnier.
Very cool. I am like, my impressed level went super high now. So, okay.
Absolutely. That's so fun.
Real quick, I asked earlier what someone thought the threat modeling is. Sam responded, it sounds to me as someone who creates possible scenarios of attack vectors and ways to protect against them.
That's a really, really great answer.
Okay, let's see.
Love that. All right, so let's kind of get into this. Like I said, this is like a presentation that I was doing for some of the talks that I was doing throughout the year. So I'm not going to go into all of these slides, but I will go through a few of them, right?
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit like what is threat modeling? So, threat modeling works to identify, communicate, and understand threats and mitigations within the context of protecting something of value. A threat model is a structured representation of all the information that affects the security of an application or a system. In essence, it's the view of the system and its environment through the lens of security. Threat modeling can be applied to a wide range of things, including software applications, systems, networks, distributed systems, Internet of Things devices, which also includes cars, business processes. Really, anything can be threat modeled. And, this is just a really quick slide to show you guys like who should be threat modeling. And the really high level takeaway is anyone with any working knowledge of a system, they can do threat modeling. But in general, I see it a lot with, security engineers. And then in my organization, we try to scale threat modeling to software engineers and architects and program managers and software testers. Because threat modeling really should be something that is not solely on the plate of the security engineer. And in my personal and genuine opinion, if you're a software engineer who knows how to threat model, there's going to be lots of opportunities that actually open up for you. And I genuinely believe that it will make you actually produce more secure code and make you think about things in a more secure way as well when you're actually engineering the solutions that you're going through. With your day-to-day.
Okay.
So yeah, let's talk about like when do we want to create threat models? So, it's really best performed during design sessions. If that's when it's the easiest to make changes, it's the least costly way to actually create threat models than it is to, add it after your solution's already been implemented. I feel like a lot of folks have a design, a system, like an application, whatever have you, first, and then they try to like put security on afterwards. Like instead of baking it in, they tack it on. That is something I see far too often, and that's probably something you guys see too if you're working in security. And it's not super desirable. And actually at Microsoft, we have ways within like the coding teams when they're creating all these services, like for example, like Word or Azure services. Anything that comes out of Microsoft actually needs to be threat modeled first. So we take, secure development lifecycle practices very, very seriously here at Microsoft, but a lot of the times when I'm working with customers, they don't. So hopefully here I can show you guys like this is the best time to do threat modeling. Basically, if you have something that's already existing, you can still create a threat model for it. If you need to update something in your design or your software, you can, still create a threat model for it, or just the little thing that you did. Anything really helps here when you're creating threat models for systems, applications, anything.
Okay.
And I feel like this is really important, the security mindset. And if you haven't listened to the Schneider on security mindset talk, I have a link here. I really recommend going and listening to it. So, security requires a particular mindset. Good security professionals, they see the world differently. They can't walk into a store without noticing how they might shoplift. They can't use a computer without wondering about the security vulnerabilities that lay inside. And they can't vote without figuring out how to vote twice. We just can't help it. We're security engineers. We want to break stuff. And honestly, this type of thinking is really not natural for most people. It's not natural for engineers. Good engineering technically involves, thinking about how things can be made to work. And the security mindset really is there for you to think about how things can be made to fail. It's like an attacker. You have to think like an attacker, an adversary. But, you don't have to actually exploit any of the vulnerabilities you find. But if you don't see the world that way, you'll never notice most security problems. And by adopting a security mindset, you emphasize the attacker, their motives, their means, and all of the ways they can wreak havoc in your system. This approach looks at entry points and system weaknesses and allows you to focus on those critical assets and how we can actually mitigate against them. And here is a really, really fun diagram that I wanted to show you guys. I create threat models all the time, and this actually came from one of my threat models. Here's something I like to do is called an attack tree or a threat map in this case, where you just start thinking about how can some of these her services actually get compromised? What can happen? What kind of threat modeling framework and mindset can I actually use here to showcase, like, if this doesn't happen, then this is a consequence that could happen as well. And, let's talk a little bit about all the phases of threat modeling. So it's really an algorithm for developing threat models. So here you can see we can analyze the existing system, design those data flow diagrams, identify those threats, brainstorm some mitigation strategies, and then continuously iterate and verify your threat model. So what I'll do now is I'll just kind of briefly go through each of these steps, and then we'll call it for this segment of it, so you guys have a better understanding on what threat modeling looks like. And I follow this core algorithm anytime I make a threat model, and I make them a lot. Like, you should see my computer. I have probably 100 threat models on there. I'm not lying. So this has been my trusty way of doing threat models. And I also would like to say that I don't use any software to help me with them. I do them all by hand, and that's kind of where my computer science, brain comes in. Is okay, I really understand this process manually. Now, how can I automate some of it? And when I'm going through all of these in mind, I'm not asking you guys how would you automate it, because it's very challenging, set of requirements there. But just thinking about what this process looks like and what you guys think you can do to make it better or adopt it in your organizations as well.
So we don't necessarily need any special type of software to build these threat models.
Nope.
Okay.
And actually, after this talk, I'll go through these different phases. I will leave you with a Microsoft Security Fundamentals threat model training video or series. It's not a video, sorry. It's actually like training and answer questions and whatnot, so that you can actually learn the same types of phases to create threat models on your own. And there's a Microsoft threat modeling tool at the end that you can help if you're building stuff in Azure, of course. However, it's a very, very deprecated tool. They don't really keep up with any of the Azure services, and they haven't for years. So I don't really like to recommend people to use the Microsoft threat modeling tool. But I mean, if you want to at least download it and play around with it, and it shows you, okay, here's the data flow diagram I created. Now here are some of the stride threats that have been identified in your threat model, and here's some mitigations that this tool does. But like I said, I don't recommend even people at Microsoft to use this tool, so I don't recommend you guys.
But it's there if you guys want to play around. And
absolutely,
gotcha.
It's definitely there. It's just severely deprecated. That's the only problem with it.
And if you look in the comments, so if you're watching from YouTube or LinkedIn, I did put in the security mindset link in there already, so that you guys can copy that and paste it for future reading.
Awesome. All right, let's get into it. So like I said, I'm not going to be too in-depth here. I just wanted to show you guys what the different phases are and what are the goals in each phase.
Okay.
So here is, the design phase, and it's really the starting ground for your threat modeling activities. And in this phase, you're going to gather as much data as possible about what you're building and what you're using to build it with. And here is when I like to actually grab all of the architecture diagrams. I like to, in my case, I work with Azure. So I like to log into, or at least get access to the Azure subscriptions that my customers are using, or my co-developers are actually creating. And I like to actually walk through the subscription. They have something called Defender, which actually tells you some, security posture of the current subscription. And I've got my own, my thoughts about Defender. Honestly, it's great in helping you kind of understand some potential things that are wrong with your stuff. However, it doesn't catch everything. And
are we talking about Microsoft Defender?
Yeah, there's one in Azure. It's called Defender for Cloud. It doesn't catch everything.
Yeah.
So I would like to, always state that software is always changing. Everything's always changing, and Defender can only do what it knows. And you have to keep in mind, a lot of these tools have a code base that it feeds information into. And if some service gets updated and maybe they forget to put a Defender rec, or maybe the recs are stale and it doesn't catch that. I would just always like to really reiterate that tools are there to help you, not for you to completely rely on them.
Yes. Like ChatGPT sometimes, folks.
Exactly.
It is a great tool and it's fun to use, but do not rely 100% on any tool. Okay?
No, and I love that you called that out, ChatGPT, because I have customers, we sell a version of like ChatGPT, like OpenAI services in Azure. And a lot of folks are plugging their own chatbots to their own databases and doing like a lot of querying on data to have like that ChatGPT experience with their own personal stuff.
Yeah.
Sounds great. However, PII can get created by adding two different fields of information together. That's PII. So that's something to worry about, or like protective information, personal information, personal data.
Personal identifying information.
Yeah, and a lot of the times too, ChatGPT has this notion, and it's like also an LLM, it's called hallucinating, where the chatbot actually doesn't really give you the right answer. And here you are, none the wiser. Like, great, thank you. All right, next. So there's just
I threw control questions at it, right? For like I said about PCI, really working to understand that. And that's where my specialty is, and so was asking it questions based on those and to help me build like some test questions and challenge questions just to test out. And I realized through those, I was like, man, these do not look right. Like it would have the right control, but it wasn't matched up to the right control number. And
absolutely,
it was like deviating more. And the more it aggregated, the further the number and the controls were getting. And it was like, what in the world? And so thorough testing. So for those of my viewers who are PCI heavy, if you're using ChatGPT for that, actually for anything, do not rely on it 100%, please.
Yeah, really don't. It's great to help you, but do not rely on it. And I really genuinely think that about anything. Like I'm such a skeptical like software engineer, but I build code, so I know what goes into it. And I understand its limitations. And I really think that unless you build, maybe that's, obfuscated away for some folks. They just like to use tools to use the tool. But yeah, you just can't rely solely on that. Like you'll fall behind.
Yes. You'll wonder why something's not working the right way. And you'll be like, but I don't even want to go there.
Right. All right. So let's get back into it. So this is the first phase, analyzing the system, getting all your data. The second phase is to actually create those data flow diagrams. And here's a more classic looking one that doesn't have like a threat map on it, on like what a data flow diagram is. It's a visual representation of any process or systems flow of information. And by mapping out your systems flow of data, DFDs help you better understand your process, your system, and cover some of its kinks, improve it. And you can even, help you implement some new process or system as well. And data flow diagrams, not only in the context of security, are helpful, but even folks that I work with are data scientists sometimes. And they think that data flow diagrams are so useful for their data use cases as well. So you would be surprised, like this is not only useful for security, but a lot of other folks use this too. All right, so here's just kind of a little diagram on some of the data flow diagram elements. It's pretty universal. So anytime you create a data flow diagram, it's going to use the same type of elements, and just making sure you're consistent and using the same types of shapes and stuff to represent the elements would help other security folks if they're looking at your DFDs. Because I also would like to say that creating security artifacts, even if you're doing it by yourself, you should always have someone look over it, because you will always miss something, and more perspectives are better to have a more, I guess, hardened threat model. And that goes for anything in security too, I would say.
Yeah.
Cool. So the next.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I know a lot of people that would appreciate. I might have to cut up that piece of the video too, because I think a lot of people would appreciate knowing that. At least people who've spoken to me. The data flow diagrams can get a little bit challenging sometimes because they're like, "What are all the shapes and what is all the arrows and all the lines?" I'm like, I know.
Absolutely. So after you have your data flow diagram, let's start to identify some threats. And this is the phase where you're going to use that data flow diagram to find potential threats against your system using threat modeling frameworks to help you. So here at Microsoft, we really like to use Stride. Microsoft created the Stride threat modeling framework, so they still like to use it. I honestly find myself using a whole lot of different frameworks, and they're really there as guidelines to help you identify threats. You don't have to be insanely prescriptive to them, and you need to find the one that helps you in your system. So it really depends on what you're doing, honestly, to help find those system weaknesses, because that's what the goal is here. Is you want to apply your security mindset. You want to look at these threat modeling frameworks against your data flow diagram to try to find threats that are in the system. And, right now I'm an AppSec engineer. I work a lot in the cloud. I work a lot with web dev components and lots of people making code. I just want to show you the common threat modeling frameworks that I use in my job. I use a lot of, MITRE and Stride and OWASP Top 10. It's going to change. It's going to vary depending on your industry. But in my industry, these are the very common ones that I look at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then the next thing I do is, brainstorm some of those mitigation strategies. And this is really the phase where all threats are decided. So you now have, your data flow diagram. You understand some of the threats that could lie in your system. Now, how do we protect your system against those threats? Here, I like to create, project-specific guidance, or just mitigation guidance. And, it really depends on the medium too. Like my threat models, they can really vary depending on who I'm working with. A lot of times folks actually just want mitigations right in the backlog. So I'll just go into GitHub or ADO or whatever it is they're using, and that's Azure DevOps, sorry. And actually just write up mitigations as user stories so that people have them to then go triage and actually work on those too. So it just really depends on what's really helpful and needed here. Sometimes it could be in a Word doc, could be in an Excel sheet. It really depends on what works best for you and your company and your team.
So it's like a board, right? It's like a board of what's out there and what to go attack. Not attack.
To mitigate.
Yep.
And here is just a really quick example on how you can actually map some of those Stride threats with a data flow diagram if you decide to use Stride as your
method.
Yeah, with your framework. Yep. And then last but not least, continuously iterate and verify. I see a lot of folks just making one threat model and then they're kind of one and done with it. That's just not how it works in any system or software or application, really anything I've ever seen. And just keeping up with those threat models are really going to help you in the long run, rather than just make another one a few years down the road and everything's just obsolete. You don't have that change history of what was already identified and then what was mitigated and so on and so forth. So I would always recommend verifying and continuously iterating on one.
Okay. So I like this because it's intentional. The goal here is to be intentional about everything. It's not to just see what, kind of leave it up, or, hey, I've done this and it's all good. Now we're coasting by. Being reactive, right?
Exactly.
This is a very proactive, continuous type method.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's true with everything. And I'm going to go ahead and skip through the actual fun slides, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. But I have a YouTube video out there where I'm going through this exercise as well as threat modeling the Death Star.
Oh, okay.
But here I want to share, I've got some threat modeling fundamentals training. I would like to put this in the chat for you. Oops, sorry.
Yep.
Here's not Admiral Aplar, but these threat modeling trainings, I really recommend doing basically all of it. It's really great and it's free. So who doesn't like free learning materials, especially if you're learning something new like threat modeling?
And that's usually what I tell people. I'm like, if you've got the time and you got the money for it, then go for it. But if you're like me and you don't have the money for it, but you got some time, look for those free ones out there.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and copy this link and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay. And once we get those links, we'll put them in the chat, or if you put them in the chat now, that's fine, or we can
I
share
threw
them
it in the
afterwards.
chat.
Okay. No biggie there. Man, so I like this because this is a very, like I said, I'm always good with intentional stuff. Audrey, one of the things that kind of trips me up sometimes is the leaving things up to, I don't want to say assumption, like I have to have things like anchored in, I don't want to say absolutes.
Only the Sith deal in absolutes.
I knew you were That's exactly why I didn't want to say it. So, but I do well when it comes to, we're that whole trust and verify scenario, right? Like I'm like, we have to have things anchored in what we're doing. So it's not just that we've built this out, we've created it, we're hoping everyone does well with it, but it's like my favorite slot or step in there was the piece about getting feedback, right?
Oh yeah.
Help me know that everything that has been spent time and effort on is the production that we want. Is it beneficial? Is it useful? Did we gather everything? Is there something we miss? And so any type of methodology, any type of discipline that exists out there where we can have something that is a two-way street, like I'm always all for it. I'm always all for it. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I do have that brain. I have a lot of friends who usually tell me, they'll be like, oh, so you always think of the negative stuff. I'm like, it's not the negative. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just thinking of all the possible scenarios that might exist, and let's tackle them now while it's easy to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like if we could spend 15 minutes talking about it and we knock them out of the way real quick, man, then when the problem really comes up, we're not wasting thousands of dollars on people's time and data collecting and gather and all that. We can mitigate all that right here,
Yeah, and there actually has been studies done where not just security but bugs in general, if you really tackle it and spend the time on it early, then you're going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars later for having
you hear my wife. So to my wife, to my coworkers, I'm helping us save hundreds of thousands of dollars. I am not being negative or not wanting to push forward with something. I just want to make sure that we are, we're taking the time now when it's free, mostly free, right? Or better than waiting for the problem to come up later and costing us thousands. Okay.
Yes.
Where's my microphone so I can drop it? Thank you, Audrey. I appreciate that because I needed to hear that from someone to help validate me. Okay, so
yeah, and just Google like how much money does it take to do better dev, engineering efforts first, than like better tests, and there's a lot of studies out there on software, and I don't know what industry you're working in. You said PCI, so I don't know what part of that it is, but still, the fact of the matter is, like, in the world of software, it's hundreds of thousands, like maybe even like millions of dollars, depending on like if there's a security breach too. And yeah, something as simple as just doing better testing or thinking about things in a different way when we're in the development phase is always going to be better in the long run.
And we do talk about that a lot, Audrey. So we always like, because there's monies that can be accounted for now, but when an organization takes a hit at their brand from some kind of breach or fault where a system's taken down, we've all seen how many times did Sony get taken down, for example, this year. They've had a few breaches than I'm sure they care to admit, and hacks that have gone on. The hit to the brand, to their character, it just damages, right? It damages any company, and it takes so much money and so much time to recuperate that trust again, right? Like I'll have real world decisions where
reputation I'm like, matters.
yes, where I'm like, well, I might go with the smaller guy or the less known guy because they did get hacked or there's a breach again or something over there in that area. So,
and that's something that people need to, also, I would hope it would be a takeaway. With enough time and enough money, an adversary will always win. They'll always get what they want. They will always do it. And, you know, that is something that in any security job I've been in has always been the same thing that I've heard. And the only way that you can do better with that understanding is make it really hard for them.
Yes.
A lot of the times they'll quit.
Right. I'm with you on that. And yeah, that's what I say. It's like you can't ever 100% secure anything in the digital world, but we don't need to make it easier for them. We do not need to make it easier for them, right?
Right.
So I'm going to just put in a little jab right here. So if you haven't enabled multi-factor authentication in any of your services, just at home, start doing that. I know it's a pain in the butt. I do, but I have had too many friends who have purchased gold to send to Russia, and it's like,
Oh.
yeah, Audrey, this year alone, and many of them have had multiple or repeated attempts, right? And there's nothing like I appreciate having secure passwords now, because I have seen when my emails are dinging off for random apps or stores that I visit, and it's like, uh, you know, unauthorized or not unauthorized. It'll say failed password attempt or something like that, and I'm like, man, this is always creeping me out. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, there's like 6 password attempts into one of my apps now, and I can see them trying to get in, but I have multi-factor on, and they're not able to get in. But still, it's freaky knowing that they're doing that right now.
Absolutely.
So anyway, going off on tangent. Audrey, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. It was very inspirational, very I mean, I can't find the words for it, but inspiration is about as close as I can get. There's more, it's a bigger word, whatever that is. But sharing your story and coming on and teaching us about threat modeling also. I did find the link and I put it in I didn't put it in LinkedIn, but I did put it in YouTube. Let me put it right there. So now it's in LinkedIn. You guys can copy that link and pop it into your browser, save it for later if you want to, so you can go through the classes or see the videos. Audrey, I do this with everyone, and before we leave, I'm going to give you time on the screen to kind of just deliver whatever message it is you want to deliver to the audience. Okay?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, thank you everybody for listening, you know, to me talk about my journey and learning a little bit about threat modeling. What I want to say is, you know, threat modeling can go really, really deep. So please take the opportunity to learn now. It can really help you in any kind of career, especially in security. For me personally, I have, you know, talks coming up. Actually, my next talk is in November. I'm doing a threat modeling workshop at Tech Tactics in Orlando. So if you're going to be there, I actually have a worksheet with a sample threat model that we could fill out together. So that's going to be really fun. Other than that, you know, I'm putting my LinkedIn in the chat. It's linkedin.com/in/Audrey Long. Go ahead and follow me. If you also just have questions about your career or, you know, find anything that I said to be inspirational, like, please send me a message. You know, I love to talk to folks, and I'd love to hear your story and your journey. And hopefully, you know, I inspire some folks to keep going, because it is hard, you know, being in security, being in engineering, just anything really in this realm is hard. And, you know, we all have been there, done that, and still doing it, I should say. So yeah, thank you so much again for you know, inviting me onto the podcast. This has been really fun. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So thank you so much, Audrey, for coming on. I did put the link in there so everyone on YouTube and Facebook, LinkedIn can see it and link to her. I'll tell you what, guys, so, you know, you go to these conferences and you see these people who present and you always wonder, are they reachable? Can I reach out? Audrey was one of the quick ones to get back to me as soon as I messaged her during her thing, because I was like, if I don't do it now, I'll forget. And because I know how I am. And then later on, I'll be like, gosh, who was that person with the cool threat modeling? Or, you know what I mean? And then I'll be like, darn it. But and Audrey was one of the ones who responded very quickly to me. So she will. Audrey, thank you so much for coming on tonight. You were fantastic and amazing. Okay. And I hope that you realize your encouragement to not just me, but the community is not just welcome, but so needed. Like, I love the positivity of people who are successful in their fields and spreading that. And so I do want to give you a very sincere and big thank you. Okay.
Thank you. No, this has been great. I love sharing my journey, and I really do have an aspiration for getting folks interested in security too. And, I'm just so happy to help in any way I can, because I know it's daunting. And especially if you're on that road or that journey now, you can do it. Anyone can do it.
Yeah. Well, when you say that, it helps me feel a lot more at ease in what I'm going through and what others I know who are working to move and transition into careers to better their lives. And so it really helps hearing your story. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Audrey. Well, I'm going to put you in the green room. You can go take a break real quick, and while I end the show, and then we'll come back and we'll just have a little chat afterwards. Okay.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. I'm being completely honest and sincere. And many of you who know me, my heart is one that is about sharing knowledge and helping to bring education to my community, to my people. And, I feel that when I find people as amazing and as inspiring as Audrey, I'm like, man, I want to show the world, and I want them to hear the story, right? And so I hope that you all were encouraged tonight, and that you'll share this with your friends and colleagues and others who, maybe even your kids. Your kids may be wanting to know what kind of jobs are out there. Show them this and show them the success that Audrey has had getting into it. And of course, it wasn't so much that it was easily gained, but that there are options, and sometimes there's roles out there that we don't know exist. And sometimes we feel like, can I really be successful in being the one who highlights the potential challenges in areas? And threat modeling, right? That's one of those. That's one of the positions that's called. I didn't know what it was before I met Audrey, and now afterwards, I'm like, oh, it's funny. It's serendipitous that I see threat modeling everywhere now, and so I know that my phone picks it up, hears it, and is like, oh, I'm going to give you an ad on threat modeling. But honestly, it's people's posts now too. I see it, and I'm like, okay, now I understand a little bit more. And so I hope you do too. Listen, if you have a topic that you think would be great to bring up on the CyberGangsters Cybersecurity, let me know. Reach out to me. I'm as easily accessible as Audrey is. Okay. If you are someone an expert in your field and you think there's some information that you would love to share with the community, come on and let me spotlight you to share that with everyone. And in the meantime, everyone, just keep pressing hard on what you're doing. I hope you're all bundling up for the cold weather coming soon, and I cannot wait to see you all again on the next episode of CyberGangsters Cybersecurity. Thank you all, everyone. Have a good night.